Today's lesson is on finding the circumference of a circle. So you might have heard that word before, you might have seen it lower down the school, but basically the circumference of a circle is just its perimeter. So we're sticking with the theme of area and perimeter of 2D shapes for the rest of this week. And before we can work out the circumference of a circle and then later on in the week work out the area of a circle, we have to be familiar with the different parts of circles. So this blue line across the middle of this circle here is what we call the diameter. So I'll label that on the diagram just now. And that is a line that travels from one side of the circle to the other side and it passes through the centre of the circle. We call that the diameter. The green line is what's called the radius, and that is exactly half of the diameter, because rather than travelling from one side all the way through to the other, it goes from the centre to the edge of the circle, so it's only half of the diameter, and that's called the radius. Then the red part, so the distance all the way around the outside of the circle, is called the circumference. And unlike when we looked at the perimeter of a triangle or a square or a rectangle, it's not just as simple as adding up all the sides, because in a circle we don't have multiple sides to add together. So we use a formula, and that formula is given to you in the formula sheet in the exam or in your assessments, and you don't have to remember it, you just have to remember how to use it. So I'm going to write the formula down and then explain where all the parts come from and what they mean. So it's circumference, which we denote with a C, equals this symbol here, which is called pi, times the diameter. And pi is a symbol that we use in maths quite a lot when we're talking about circles. And it was discovered thousands and thousands of years ago that if you had a circle and you wanted to find the distance around the outside of the circle, you could take the distance from one end to the other, going through the centre, and multiply it by a number that was roughly 3. So before there was quite accurate measuring equipment, it was thought that this value, which we now know to be pi, was roughly about 3. And science has been able to refine that estimate quite well over time. And we've been able to work out that pi can be rounded to 2 decimal places as 3.14. It does go on forever and ever, and people are still trying to find extra decimal places of pi, but for the purposes of this topic, we are only going to use pi as 3.14. There is a pi button on your calculator, but you're not going to use that. You're just going to type in 3.14 and then multiply it by whatever number you're multiplying by. The units for circumference are similar to the units that we used for perimeter of 2D shapes in the last lesson. So it's either centimetres or metres or kilometres or millimetres or whatever units you get given to tell you the length of the diameter. Use those same units to talk about the circumference, because circumference is just a length. So for the first example, we're asked to find the circumference of the circle below, and we can see from the diagram that the diameter of the circle is 9 centimetres. So our first step is to copy down the formula, which again you don't have to remember, but you will become more familiar with it the more questions you practice, and then substitute our values in. So circumference equals pi multiplied by the diameter. We know that pi is 3.14 and the diameter is 9. You should be able to do this without a calculator. So I'm going to show that over at the side here. 4 9s are 36, 1 9 is 9 plus 3 is 12, 3 9s are 27 plus 1 is 28, and make sure you put your decimal place back in the same point. So circumference equals 28.26 centimetres. And it really is as simple as that. Copy down the formula, substitute the numbers in, multiply the numbers together, and then include units in your answer. This second example though, we're still finding the circumference of the circle, but something's just a little bit different with this example. So on the example before, we had the distance from this side all the way over to the other side. But in this example, we only have this here, which is the radius and not the diameter. And our formula doesn't say anything about the radius. Our formula only has d for diameter. So if we know that the radius of the circle is 3.5 metres, we have to find the diameter before we can start working through our formula and getting an answer. So the diameter is just 2 lots of the radius. So if the radius is 3.5, then the diameter is 7. You just times it by 2 to get the diameter. So when we substitute in, we're doing 3.14 times 7. And again, you should be able to do that without a calculator. So if I do it quickly down here, 4 times 7 is 28. 1 times 7 is 7, plus the 2 is 9. 3 sevens are 21. And then remember your decimal point and fill in your final answer. So 21.98, the units are in metres, and that is your final answer. So we're still following that kind of 3-step process of copy down your formula, substitute the numbers in, and then give your final answer with units.